My name is Callie Reeves, and I was 26 years old the night my parents took me to dinner to end everything between us. Or at least, that's what they thought was happening. Here's what they didn't know. 3 tables behind my mom's chair that night sat a woman I'd only known for 8 months. A woman with my exact chin, my exact way of going quiet when something hits too close. A woman who had driven 2 hours, gotten dressed up, and was sitting with her back straight and her hands folded, waiting for me to need her. My parents had no idea she was there. They were too busy planning what they thought was going to be the worst night of my life. It wasn't. But it took me 26 years to understand why. Stay with me. Because the ending of this story is not what you think it is, and the part that changed everything happened before we ever walked through that restaurant door. My mom, Sandra, wore her pearl earrings that night. The ones she only brought out for funerals and big moments. My dad, Roger, had made the reservation under his last name, not mine. I clocked that the second the hostess looked up from her screen. Hargrove, party of 3? Roger answered before I got a single word out. No balloons. No banner. No cake in the back with my name on it. Now you might be thinking maybe she was just overthinking it. Maybe it really was just dinner. But I've spent 4 years as a contract paralegal at an estate planning firm in Phoenix, Arizona. I've sat with enough families in enough cold rooms to know the difference between a celebration and a setup. And the air between Sandra and Roger that night had one temperature, closing argument. So I did what I always do when a room goes cold on me. I kept my breathing steady. I noted the exits. And I noticed the little gold table marker 3 tables back and to my left. Table 11. I stored that number without knowing exactly why. The way you memorize a landmark before you've decided you'll need to find your way back. I put my own thing down next to my water glass. Plain manila folder. Nothing fancy. Sandra glanced at it and probably figured it was work stuff. She had no idea what was inside it. And that folder? That folder is the whole story. To understand why that night was always coming, you need to understand what birthdays looked like in my house growing up. My birthday meant 1 cupcake from the gas station. The cellophane-wrapped kind that sweats if you leave it on the counter. 1 candle. My mom would light it, hum half the song while already checking her phone, and then drift into the other room. Done. Meanwhile, my cousin Marcus, my Aunt Cheryl's son, got full backyard parties every year. Taco card. DJ. Bounce house. 'Cause Marcus was what my Aunt Cheryl called family. I remember asking when I turned 9 if I could have a real party. Just once. Cheryl was there that day, glass of wine in hand, and she answered for my mom. She smiled when she said it. That's the part that really got me. How warm she sounded. We can only do 1 big thing per season, honey. Like I was a budget line item. Like wanting the same thing as Marcus was just being greedy. That one sentence taught me more than any school lesson ever did. Kid who asks for less costs less. And being easy, being low maintenance, was the only real thing I had going for me in that house. I didn't let myself feel sad about it. I told myself I was practical. That I was easy. That being small was a strength. It wasn't until I was older that I understood I hadn't been practical. I had just been priced. And nobody had ever told me the number out loud. Until that dinner. The one person who ever made me feel like an actual human being, not a line on a spreadsheet, was Grandma Loretta. Roger's mom. Every Sunday at 3 o'clock I called her. From my first week of community college through every waitressing shift, every night class, every certification exam, Loretta always picked up like she'd been sitting by the phone waiting. She had opinions about everything and no regrets about anything. She was the kind of woman who cut straight through nonsense the way you'd cut through static, louder and clearer until the truth was the only thing left. When I was 13, my cousin Marcus told me at a family cookout that I wasn't a real Hargrove. I ended up in Loretta's kitchen crying into a dish towel. She put down what she was doing, took my face in both hands, and said something I carried for the next 13 years. You were chosen on purpose, sweetheart. That is not lesser. That is different. Then she made me a grilled cheese and let me stay up watching late TV until I fell asleep on her couch. Loretta died when I was 24. I gave the only eulogy that talked about who she was instead of what she owned. And within 6 weeks of her funeral, Sandra and Roger had quietly moved out of their cramped townhouse and into the bigger place on Birchwood Lane, a property that had been tied to Loretta's name in ways I understood better than anyone realized. I was too deep in grief to ask the right questions back then. But there was something Loretta had said to me near the end, her voice thin over the phone. I made sure in writing that you'll never have to beg for what belongs to you. I thought she meant it as a pep talk. A grandmother being a grandmother. It would take me almost a year, and a completely random trip to the county clerk's office, to find out she had meant every single word of it. Notarized. Binding. And timed like a clock. The year before I turned 26, my family started pulling away. Not all at once, that would have been too obvious. It was slower than that. Texts that used to come back in an hour started taking 3 days. Sandra dropped me from the holiday planning group chat and then acted confused when I showed up to Christmas without a dish nobody had asked me to bring. Aunt Cheryl started dropping a specific word into the family messages she'd never used before. Blood. Blood only weekend at the lake. Blood only Thanksgiving. You understand, honey. I understood. I just didn't have the paperwork yet to know why it was all happening at the same time. And that's the thing about families that turn cold on a schedule, it isn't just distance. Real drift happens slowly. This was different. This was 3 people pulling back at the same moment in the same season. My work brain kept flagging it. 3 invoices showing up on the same Tuesday aren't a coincidence. Something was moving underneath this family. Something with a due date. Then Sandra called. Her voice was 3 degrees warmer than it had been in months, that specific warmth that always meant she needed something. Callie, honey, she said. She only ever called me honey when there was a favor coming. We'd love to take you out for 26. Properly this time. The way we never quite managed. Every part of me said, this is a trap. So I said yes. Sweetly. The way she'd trained me. Then I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold and I thought about timelines. About Birchwood Lane. About the word blood showing up in the chat right now this season. About what Loretta had said from her sickbed. And about a manila folder already sitting in my work bag that had nothing to do with my mom, and everything to do with finally knowing where I really came from. I didn't warn Sandra. I didn't tip Roger off. I made my own calls. Quiet kind. Kind you make when you've decided you're not going to be caught off guard. You're going to be ready. And you're going to make sure the right people are in the room when everything finally lands. Let me tell you how I got that folder. 'Cause this is where everything changes. I left that house at 18 with 2 bags and a community college letter I'd filled out myself. Nobody drove me. I worked overnight at a drugstore, took morning classes, transferred to Arizona State, and got my paralegal certificate while waiting tables on weekends. I paid for every hour of it myself. Not bragging, I'm telling you because it matters for what's coming. Nobody handed me a thing. I built everything I had out of overtime and stubbornness. By 26, I was a contract paralegal focusing on trusts and estates, and I was genuinely good at it. I spent my days inside other people's lives, organizing what happens to everything a person built after they can't hold on to it anymore. Benefit assignments. Distribution schedules. The dry, careful language that decides who gets what long after the funeral flowers have died. I could read a legal document the way some people read a face, every single word placed on purpose, every silence meaning something. The biggest joke of my life, one I couldn't laugh at for years, was that I could tell a total stranger exactly what they were owed and exactly what they weren't. But I could not, for the life of me, make my own family simply want me at the table. Then, about 8 months before that dinner, two things landed in the same week and flipped the entire story on its head. The first was a letter I'd half expected and half dreaded for years. After Loretta died, I'd finally signed up with the Arizona Adoption Reunion Registry. I didn't really expect anything to come of it. But 12 weeks later, an envelope arrived in handwriting I didn't know, careful and looping the way someone writes when they've practiced what they need to say. Her name was Denise Calloway. She wrote that she'd been 20 years old when she gave me up. That she hadn't wanted to. That she had thought about me every single April for 26 years. And that if I ever wanted to meet her, any day, any distance, no strings, she would come. She signed her name. Then, underneath it, she added one more line. I read it so many times the paper went soft at the crease. I never stopped saving you a seat. The second envelope came 3 days later. And it had nothing to do with Denise. Or so I thought. Arizona had recently started letting adult adoptees access their original birth records through the same registry. While I was already in the system, habit kicked in and I pulled the file on Loretta's estate. Same way a mechanic can't walk past a car without checking the tires. And right there, in the payment records of the Loretta May Hargrove Family Trust, set up 14 months before she died, managed by a bank completely separate from Roger and Sandra, I found it. The monthly support payments to Roger and Sandra Hargrove will stop on the named person's 26th birthday. After that date, everything left in the trust will pass to my granddaughter Callie. Not their estate. Not their will. A whole separate trust. Held by a bank they couldn't get to. Set to leave their hands permanently on the exact date they'd picked for a birthday dinner. 2 letters in 1 week. One told me where I came from. The other told me, in my grandmother's own notarized words, exactly what my parents were about to lose, and why everyone had suddenly turned cold at the same time. I didn't call Sandra and blow up. I don't work that way. I've watched too many families throw away a solid position because they couldn't hold it together for 5 more minutes. What I had was a process. So I used the process. I took a day off, drove the documents to an estate attorney in Scottsdale, no connection to my family, paid out of my own pocket, and had her confirm what I'd already figured out. The monthly payments to Roger and Sandra were real, ongoing, and ending on their own terms on my birthday. What remained in the trust after that passed to me through the bank. Nothing they could file, sign, or cancel would stop it. Their own will had nothing to do with it. Whatever they were planning at that dinner was a performance on the wrong stage. My attorney, a sharp woman named Ms. Ferreira who wore bright blazers and had no time for nonsense, asked if I wanted to give Sandra and Roger a heads up. Soften the landing. I said no. I said I wanted 3 things in a folder and that was it. A letter from her firm confirming I had legal help, so they'd know before I said a word. Trust's payment schedule with the key part highlighted. And my original birth certificate with Denise Calloway's name in the mother line, so that when the moment came, everyone at that table would understand exactly which family I was choosing to leave. And which one I'd already chosen to keep. I closed that folder, put it in my bag, and carried it for 8 months like a quiet engine I hadn't turned on yet. The dinner invitation just told me when to turn the key. Now I need to tell you about Denise. 'Cause you have to understand what I was walking toward before any of the rest of this makes sense. We met for the first time at a pancake place in Tempe, halfway between our cities because she didn't want me to have to drive too far. That one small thing undid me more than any speech ever could have. She was nervous in a way that showed. She kept opening and closing a photo album she'd brought, like she wasn't sure she'd earned the right to show it to me yet. She had my chin. My same way of going still when something hit close. Over the following months, we built something slowly and carefully the way you fix a floor while you're still standing on it. I met my half-sister Jess, 22, a nursing student, who texted me memes within 48 hours of our first meeting like I'd always been there to receive them. I met Denise's mom, Grandma June, small, sharp mid-70s, who took one long look at me on the day we met and said simply, "Well, there she is." Like I'd just been running late. Not gone for 26 years. They never asked me for a single thing. No favor. No role. No quiet bill I'd have to pay later. Denise told me the third time we sat down together, over coffee that had gone cold while we were talking, the sentence that became the truest thing anyone has ever said to me. We kept your seat at this table, sweetheart. We never gave it away. I, who could put together a flawless legal document for a stranger in my sleep, who knew all the right words about belonging, sat in that booth and genuinely did not know what to do with my hands. 'Cause for the first time in my life, I was wanted by people who got nothing out of wanting me. After 26 years of being useful, I didn't know how to just be welcome. Being needed I understood completely. Being needed is a job. You show up, you produce, you stay easy. I had been needed my whole life and I had confused that steadiness for love. The same way you can mistake a long daily commute for a destination just because you make it every single day. What Denise and Jess and June offered had no job description. And that scared me way more than Sandra ever had. The first time Denise called just to ask how my week was going, no reason, no favor underneath it, I had to pull my car over because I couldn't see the road. I tested them in small ways I'm not proud of. I'd bail on plans to see if they'd get cold. They'd just say, no worries next time, and mean it. I'd insist on paying for everything, trying to buy my own welcome. June finally held my face in both hands, the way Loretta used to, and told me, you don't have to pay your way in here, baby girl. We already made room. And slowly, something in me that had been tight since I was 9 years old started, not disappearing but loosening. So when Sandra called to book that birthday dinner, I already knew where I wanted to spend the evening. I just decided to be in 2 places at the same time. Here's who I called. I called Denise. I explained the whole thing, the suspicions, the trust, the folder, the dinner that felt less like a birthday and more like a verdict being read. I told her I didn't know exactly what they had planned. But I knew I didn't want to hear it alone. And I really didn't want to perform the breakdown they were counting on. Denise didn't pause. She said, what time? What should we wear? Callie, we would be honored to watch you not need them. Then I called the Viridia Grill in North Phoenix and booked a second table under my own name. Callie Reeves, party of 4. Table 11 near the back, 3 tables behind the Hargrove booking already on the books. The host said the table was available and I nearly laughed at how perfectly it all lined up. My parents were going to end things with me within full view of the people who'd been saving me a chair since before they decided I was no longer worth keeping. I told Denise, Jess, and June to come in a little after us. Order something. Just be there. Let me come to them when I was ready, and yes, I wanted witnesses. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I've seen enough family confrontations turn into one person's word against another's. But they were never just witnesses to me. That was the whole difference between what they were doing and what Sandra was doing. The folder was how I'd help my parents understand they'd lost. Table 11 was where I'd go to remember I'd already won, long before they ever sat down. Back at the restaurant, we ordered drinks before anyone said anything true. Sandra praised the wine list like she'd written it. Roger told a parking story he'd already told in the car. Nobody touched the bread basket. And then, somewhere between the apps and the food nobody was going to eat, Sandra folded her hands on the table and shifted into a voice I know the way I know a fire alarm. Low. Careful. Rehearsed. We've always done our absolute best for you, she started. Roger nodded a half beat behind her, the way he'd nodded behind her for 25 years. We gave you stability. A good home. Chances a lot of kids never get. I kept one hand flat on the manila folder and watched Roger's eyes drop to the tab label and come back up. I typed it. Left just the top edge showing above my fingers. 4 letters. He could see them if he looked. He looked. I covered the rest with my thumb, not to hide it, just to let him wonder. And I watched the wondering start working on him the way slow water works on stone. Sandra kept going. Sacrifices. Adjustments. What it costs to raise a child. And I thought about a gas station cupcake sweating on a counter and one candle and my mom already in the other room on her phone. I said nothing. She paused, took a careful sip of wine, set the glass down like someone reaching the part of the presentation they've been looking forward to most. Then she said the line that opened everything up. "There's something, Callie, that you should have been told a long time ago." She said it gently, like a doctor with a clipboard, like someone very happy with their own delivery. "You're adopted." She watched my face. "We adopted you when you were a baby. You were never biologically ours. We want you to know we never meant to keep it from you forever." She was waiting for me to fall apart. The whole night, the linen tablecloth, the pearl earrings, every practiced pause, all of it had been built for this 1 second. The moment her adopted daughter learned she'd been a stranger all along, and broke into pieces Sandra could sweep up and walk away from. I'll be honest with you. It landed. There's some part of you that always expects the ground to be there, until it's not. And a corner of me, the 9-year-old who'd learned to be small and easy and quiet, did flinch. But I had 8 months. I had Denise's letter going soft at the crease. I had June saying there she is like I was only late. I had already lived past this moment before it ever happened. My mom leaned in, voice soft and almost kind, and said the sentence I will hear in quiet rooms for the rest of my life. "We only kept you for the benefits, Callie." She smiled when she said it. That smile. That's what finally set me free. Not the cruelty, I'd grown up fluent in that. It was the smile. You don't smile delivering the worst line of someone's life unless you've run it so many times you've started to enjoy saying it. And in that smile I saw the whole shape of it clearly for the first time. I hadn't been a daughter who let them down. I'd been an investment that had stopped paying. Roger tried to walk it back with the careful voice of a man explaining a tax situation. "There were state payments in the early years," he said, eyes down. "The adoption had come with a monthly check when I was small. That stopped when I was still in grade school. After that, there were tax savings. And then there were," he paused before saying the name, "Loretta's wishes. She had ideas about what a family should look like. Adopting me had helped them fit that picture in ways that had turned out to be, and here was his word for it, worthwhile. For a good number of years. I sat very still and let the math of my whole childhood rearrange itself into the right equation. The one cupcake. The hand-me-downs from Marcus with Cheryl's return tags still on them. The way the heat in my bedroom was always the first thing they turned down when the bill came. They hadn't been struggling. They'd been keeping the difference between what a child costs and what a child earns. And I had been the earner. "We did invest in you," Roger said. Like that closed it. Sandra, done with his numbers, cut straight to the bottom line. "Payments ended years ago, Callie. What came after them ends tonight. You're 26 now. There's nothing left that keeping you connected to us does for us." She said it with a small, almost sorry exhale. "The way you'd mentioned that a coupon had run out." Then Roger reached into the leather folder he'd brought, the one I'd figured held a birthday card, and slid a thin stack of papers across the tablecloth until it touched my plate. "We've already filed to make things official," he said. "You won't be in our estate paperwork. You won't be a named person on anything of ours. We wanted to handle this face-to-face. Cleanly." He'd been coached on that word. Cleanly. I could hear the lawyer who'd put it there. Picked up the first page and read the top in about 4 seconds. The same way I'd read 1,000 of them. And I saw, with the clear, quiet certainty of someone who does this every single day, exactly what they had done. They had gone after the wrong document. They had spent real money. Hired a real attorney. Drafted and filed real paperwork. All of it aimed at their own modest will. Meanwhile, the actual document, the one that controlled everything that actually mattered, was sitting completely untouched. They had cut me out of a will while leaving the trust alone. They thought the power in this room lived in their own paperwork. So that's where they aimed. And they missed completely. I did not tell them that. You don't tell the other side they sued the wrong person. You let them finish. So I slid the papers back an inch, not accepting them, not refusing. And I let them keep believing they'd won. Roger kept glancing at my folder. I watched the worry climb up his neck in a slow red line. He'd seen those 4 letters on the tab. He was doing the same math I'd done 8 months ago. And the answer was starting to scare him. Is there, he started, then stopped. Is there something we should know, Callie? I gave him the first real smile of the night. Not yet, I said. That was when Aunt Cheryl walked in. She swept in from the bar with Marcus trailing behind her, both of them doing that thing people do when they've been waiting for a text and are pretending it's a coincidence. Sandra had called for backup. She always worked better with a crowd that would nod and lean in if things got messy. Cheryl air-kissed my cheek with a practiced smile and pulled up a chair without asking. Marcus, 27 and still carrying himself like his mom had called ahead, gave me the look I'd been getting from him since we were kids. The look that said, you always knew you didn't really belong here. Cheryl didn't bother being subtle. We all just want what's best, she said, putting a hand over Sandra's. Families have to make real choices about who's really part of them. You've always been a smart, practical girl, Callie. You get it. Blood looks after blood. There it was. The word she'd been dropping in the group chat all year. Finally said out loud at the exact table it had been built for. I looked at my aunt, the woman who'd explained to me at 8 years old with a warm smile why I wasn't worth a party. And I felt the last bit of obligation I'd been carrying for 26 years just go slack. These weren't people I was losing. These were people I was putting down. I had carried them a long, long way, further than they deserved. And I was finally, gloriously tired. Across the table, Roger had gone quiet. He wasn't joining in. He was staring at his hands. And then, under Cheryl's voice, he leaned slightly toward me and said something low enough that only I could hear it. Your grandmother loved you, he said. Just those 4 words. He stopped there. For a second I saw another version of Roger Hargrove, the one that might have existed if he'd ever once picked the harder thing over the easy one. His eyes were wet. He had genuinely loved Loretta, I knew that. And somewhere inside him he understood that the woman he'd loved had wrapped me in legal protection specifically because she didn't trust her own son to take care of me. That had to be a rough thing to sit with. I waited. 'Cause there was a version of that night where Roger said the next sentence. The apology. The I'm sorry, this is wrong, I won't be part of this. And if he had said it, I would have heard it and it would have mattered. But he looked at Sandra. And Sandra was watching him the way you watch someone who's about to make a mistake you need them not to make. And I watched him choose. He sat back. He picked up his water. The almost sentence died right there where so many of his almost sentences had died before. 4 words toward the truth. That was the closest thing to love anyone at the front table showed me all night. Then Sandra, frustrated with my refusal to perform the breakdown she'd planned, pulled out one last page from the portfolio. She uncapped a pen and set it across the paper like a little gift. It's just an acknowledgement, she said. That we've told you. That you understand where things stand. Sign it and we can all have a decent meal and go our separate ways. I picked it up and read the first paragraph in about 5 seconds. Language I'd typed 100 times myself. The person signing gives up and releases any and all claims, interests, or future expectations. This was not an acknowledgement. It was a legal release dressed up to look like one. A document built to get me on record, while I was still stinging from the reveal before I had time to think clearly, agreeing that I had no claim on anything. The move you make when you want to head off exactly the kind of challenge I was completely set up to bring. I've watched people in real pain sign away everything at kitchen tables because someone slid a pen over at the right moment. My mom was counting on my pain. She had no idea the pain had a trust attached to it. I left the pen where it was. Roger was still staring at the folder. The worry had moved past his neck and settled in his jaw. "Dad," I said. The voice I use at work when I've found the problem in someone's filing and I'm letting them see it themselves. "Which document did you file against? Your will or Grandma Loretta's trust?" The whole table shifted. Sandra's glass stopped halfway to her mouth. Cheryl's hand went still. Roger blinked at me the way you'd blink at someone who just started speaking a language you half remember from a place you've never been. Because in one short question I had told them 3 things they hadn't planned for. That I knew there was a difference between the two. That I knew which one actually mattered. And that I'd known long enough to get completely comfortable with the details. Sandra said what, and it came out smaller than she'd meant it to. I let the question hang. The most powerful person in any room is the one who doesn't rush to fill the silence. I turned my water glass a quarter turn on the cloth, lined it up with the edge of the folder and looked at my dad, who had gone pale, who already understood, whose eyes were quietly begging me not to open it. I opened it. No big moment. No dramatic reveal. I simply turned the folder to face them and laid the 3 pages out flat on the white cloth, side by side, the way I'd set documents in front of a client who needed to see their own situation clearly. The retainer letter first, firm name at the top, my name, Ms. Ferreira's signature. Confirmation I had a lawyer. Payment schedule of the Loretta May Hargrove Family Trust, second, the key paragraph already marked in yellow. The monthly support payments to Roger and Sandra Hargrove will stop on the named person's 26th birthday. After that date, everything remaining in the trust passes to my granddaughter Callie. And third, my original birth certificate. Denise Calloway's name in the mother line. Right where Sandra had always assumed her own name belonged. I didn't point at anything. I let the papers do the work. Sandra's eyes went straight to the trust schedule, of course they did. I watched her read it. Watched the words land. Watched her reach the part that said remainder and the part that said Callie, and I watched the color leave her face from the top down, like a blind being pulled slowly across a window. She looked at me. Then at Roger. Then back at the page. The way people look when they're hoping the second reading is going to say something kinder than the first. It never does. "Mom," I said gently, because I could afford to be gentle now. "You went after the wrong family. The one you cut me out of was always the smaller one." She put it together fast, I'll give her that. The house on Birchwood Lane, funded by the trust she'd assumed she'd live in forever. The monthly payments that had quietly carried their comfortable life, ending tonight by their own rules. The remainder, the real value, the part she'd been living next to for years without ever actually touching, moving to the daughter she'd just told was no longer useful. And the release. Her neat little document that I had been seconds from signing. Worth nothing because it covered a claim on a will that was never where the value lived anyway. She had brought every weapon she owned to the wrong fight. Here's what I knew was coming next. People like Sandra don't say sorry when they get caught. They switch gears. Her face changed. Cold drained out. A warm, almost motherly look flooded in. She reached across the table for my hand. "Callie," she said, voice soft in a way it had never once been when it cost her anything. "We're still your parents. Whatever those papers say, we're still family." The word family. From the same mouth that 20 minutes ago had said we only kept you for the benefits. I looked at her hand reaching for mine. And I did not take it. People expect this to be the part where I made them pay. Recited numbers. Watched them squirm. Ordered the most expensive thing on the menu and left them the bill. I understand wanting that. I wanted it too for a minute. But I handle estates for a living and I'll tell you the truth about power. The strongest spot in any room is never the one with the biggest number. It's the one that doesn't need the number at all. I had a career I built with my own 2 hands. I had savings from years of double shifts and tight budgets. I did not need Loretta's trust to be free. And that, more than any amount on any schedule, was what Sandra could not survive knowing. So I closed the folder. I gathered the 3 pages back in, unhurried. And I put their pen, the one brought for my surrender, down beside Sandra's plate. I had won before I'd sat down. I'd won it by knowing things, by getting ready, by refusing to walk into a trap unaware. There was nothing left to fight over. There was only the question of where I wanted to spend the rest of my birthday. And I'd settled that 8 months ago in a vinyl booth in Tempe when a nervous woman with my chin slid a photo album across a table and didn't ask me for a single thing. I stood up. Just like you'd stand up from any table. No drama. But the effect on the front table was instant and total. Sandra's hand was still hanging in the air where mine should have been. "Sit down," she said, and the soft mask dropped. The old cold control came back into her voice fast. "Sit down, Callie. Where do you think you're going?" Cheryl sat up straighter. Marcus, for once in his life, stopped smirking. Roger just looked exhausted. The look of a man watching the only truly good thing his mom ever did for anyone walk permanently out of his reach. I picked up the folder and held it against my chest. I looked at Sandra, the woman who'd spent 26 years and one expensive dinner trying to make sure I understood I had no real place anywhere. And I told her where I was going in the most straightforward words I had. "My birth family is sitting 3 tables behind you." I didn't say it to hurt her. I didn't need to. It had been true the whole meal. True while she rehearsed her smile. True while she slid her release across the cloth. True while she leaned in with that practiced warmth and told me I wasn't worth keeping. She had spent the whole evening thinking she was ending things with me in front of a room full of strangers. She hadn't been in front of strangers. She'd been doing it 15 feet from the people who had kept a chair open for me for 26 years. And they had seen every word. I watched it hit her. And I watched my mom begin, very slowly, to turn around in her chair. She turned the way you turn when part of you already knows and is begging the rest of you to be wrong. Pearl earrings came around. Her shoulders. Her chin. And there, at table 11, 3 tables back, in the warm low light of the Viridia Grill on a Tuesday evening in April, were Denise and June and Jess. They had come in quietly, ordered something, eaten almost nothing, and watched my mom say the worst things I have ever had said to me. They had kept their seats and their calm because I'd asked them to let me come to them. Denise met Sandra's eyes first. No glare. No big move. She just looked, calm and steady, at the woman who had raised her daughter on one candle and a tax break. Then she looked at me. And her whole face opened the way a window opens in spring after a long winter inside. June already had her napkin folded on the table. Ready. Like she'd been counting my steps across the room. Jess had stopped looking at her phone. Sandra's eyes moved from Denise's chin to mine and back again, working out the math of what she was seeing. I watched the exact second she understood that the family she'd just declared me too expensive to be part of had been sitting 15 feet behind her the whole time. In real chairs. Watching the whole thing. She turned back to me. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in my whole life, my mom had no next line. And in the silence where her script should have been, a chair scraped at table 11. All 3 of them stood up. Not to make a scene, not to come at anyone, just to be on their feet when I walked across the room to them. The way you stand when someone you've been waiting on finally comes through the door. June stood first because June does everything first. Then Denise. Then Jess, who knocked her knee on the table leg in her hurry and did not care even a little. They didn't say a word in Sandra's direction. They didn't have to. The standing said everything. The restaurant had gone quiet around us. That particular stillness of people who can feel something real and human happening and have quietly stopped pretending not to watch. A server froze mid-step with a tray. 2 women at the bar turned their heads fully. I walked past Sandra, still half-turned in her chair. Past Cheryl, who had finally run out of the word blood. Past Roger, who lifted his eyes to me as I passed, and then dropped them again. One last choice. Same as always. 15 feet. 3 tables. 26 years. When I reached them, June took my face in both hands, the exact same way Loretta always had, and Denise pulled out the empty chair beside her own. The 4th chair. The one they'd asked the host to set even though their booking was for 3. "We saved you a seat," Denise said. "We always did." And I sat down in it. In the seat that had been waiting. At the table that had wanted me before they even knew if I'd ever come. That was when Sandra lost the one thing she had never once lost in front of other people. I heard her chair scrape back. Heard her stand up. Heard every bit of that careful composure crack straight through like ice. "After everything we paid for," she said, and it wasn't quiet anymore. Carried across the whole dining room, sharp and climbing. "After everything we gave up, the years, the house, all of it, you do this to us? In public? You embarrass your family over money?" Heads turned. Finley. Couple near Sandra went completely still. Cheryl was pulling at Sandra's arm, hissing at her to sit down, that people were watching. But Sandra was past being managed. The script was gone. And all she had left was the truth falling out of her sideways. "We gave you everything," she said, to a room full of people who had just watched the last half hour unfold. "I noticed," she said, "gave. Not loved. Even now. Even caught. The word love still wouldn't come. 'Cause it had never been in the house to begin with. I stayed in my seat at table 11. I didn't stand up to match her. I didn't raise my voice to meet hers. Denise's hand had found mine under the table. I just held on and let Sandra be loud, because the loudness was doing my work for me. Every single person in that restaurant was watching a calm young woman sitting quietly with people who clearly adored her. And a furious older woman shouting about what she'd paid for. Nobody hears a parent screaming about money and thinks, "There's the real family." Roger never stood up at all. He put his face in his hands. I let Sandra run out of words the way a storm runs out of rain. And when the quiet came back, I did one last thing before I gave the rest of the night to the people who'd actually earned it. I stood up, walked the 3 tables back to the front, and set the trust payment schedule face up on the cloth in front of Sandra. I told her she could keep it. My attorney had the originals. I wanted her to have something to look at during the longest evening of her life. Then I looked at the two of them, Sandra, who had priced me at a gas station cupcake and a useful tax break. Roger, who had known the right thing, could feel the right thing, and could only ever bring himself to do it once it cost him nothing. And I said the one sentence I'd written in my own head in the parking lot before I'd walked in. The one I'd saved, the one I promised myself I'd only use if I'd earned it. "You kept me for the benefits," I said. "They kept a seat for me." I turned around. I walked back to table 11. And I did not look back once. Not when Cheryl called my name. Not when Sandra said something I couldn't hear and didn't try to. I sat back down beside Denise. June had ordered me a slice of chocolate cake while I was gone, dark frosting, the good kind. And Jess, sweet chaotic Jess, had taken the small candle from the table's centerpiece and pressed it into the middle of the slice. One candle. The matching of it caught in my throat so hard I almost couldn't breathe. Denise leaned over and said quietly, "Blow it out, sweetheart. Make a wish." And I realized I didn't have one. I already had everything I'd been wishing for since I was 9 years old, wondering why I wasn't worth a birthday party. Trust did exactly what Loretta built it to do. On my 26th birthday, the monthly payments to Roger and Sandra Hargrove stopped, on the date and terms Loretta had locked in place 14 months before she passed. What was left in the trust moved to me through the bank, untouched by the will my parents had spent good money updating. Because you can't cut someone out of a trust you never had control over. Their unsigned release was worth exactly what it had always been worth. Within about a year and a half, Roger and Sandra sold the house on Birchwood Lane. Without the payments, they couldn't carry it. I heard that Aunt Cheryl was furious to find out that none of Loretta's money was going anywhere near Marcus, That it had moved, cleanly and legally, to the girl Cheryl had spent years explaining wasn't quite family enough for the bounce house. I didn't take anyone to court. I didn't put anything online. I simply stopped responding. And I let the silence be the line, which is honestly the only kind that ever truly holds. Roger texted me once about a month later. 3 words: I am sorry. No explanation. No follow-up. I didn't respond. I heard through a cousin later that when Cheryl tried to get the family together to fight Loretta's trust, Roger quietly shut the whole thing down. Told them his mom had every right to leave her money exactly where she wanted. That it was hers. That it was over. He was right. He was also, as always, about 3 years late, saying the truth out loud in a room where it cost him nothing and changed nothing. That was the whole of Roger Hargrove. A man who knew the right thing. Who could even feel it. Who could only ever bring himself to say it out loud once, saying it required nothing at all from him. I didn't need the apology. But I was quietly glad he'd finally been honest, even if only in a text, even if only to himself. Denise and I talk every Sunday now at 3 o'clock. The same hour I used to save for Loretta. June taught me her grilled cheese recipe. Jess still sends me memes at 11:30 at night like I've always been in her contacts. And somewhere in a drawer in Denise's kitchen, there's a photo album that doesn't close right anymore because it finally has enough pages. Being useful was all my parents ever wanted from me. Being wanted, really wanted freely with no invoice underneath it, was the one thing I'd never had. Took me 26 years and one very planned dinner to understand that anyone who only keeps you for what you give them has already told you, as plainly as they ever will, that they were never really your family at all. That's my story. 25 birthdays. 1 candle every time. Store-bought. Nobody really paying attention. And on the 26th, a whole table lit one without being asked. If someone in your life only shows up when you're useful, only warms up when they need something, only claims you when there's a benefit attached, this is your sign. Stop trying to earn a seat at a table that was never truly set for you. There is a table somewhere with your name on it. And the people around it aren't keeping score. You don't have to earn the people who love you. They just keep the seat open. This is silent revenge. And if this story hit different for you, if you've ever been kept around for what you could give instead of who you are, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below right now. Tell me your city and the time you're watching this. Are you up late in Chicago? Morning coffee in Houston? Watching from your car in Atlanta during lunch? Let's see where the Silent Revenge family is tuning in from today. If this story moved you, share it. You know somebody who needs to hear this. Maybe it's a friend still trying to earn their way into a family that never really chose them. Maybe it's someone sitting at their own version of that table right now. Send it to them. Don't overthink it. Just send it. Hit the like button if you stayed till the end. It tells me these stories matter to you and it helps more people find this channel. And subscribe to Silent Revenge because we tell these stories every week. Real moments. Real people. Quiet, steady kind of strength that doesn't make noise until it has to. I'll see you in the next one.